It's time for ProAm Predittions.
Hello and welcome back to ProAm Predictions. I am Paul O'D and I'm representing the amateur side. And as always, I am joined by Mr. Brian the Pike Man Moore on the professional side. How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm all good, Paul. How are things?
I'm not too bad at all. I suppose we will touch on last week's card, the Bellator 258. What a phenomenal card. And with a change of champions in your own division. What did you make of that fight?
Sergio Pettis really surprised me, if I'm honest. I did not think he'd get past Archuleta, but he did so very convincingly. I thought he looked great. His counter-striking was really good. And we found out a lot of things about Archuleta in that fight that we hadn't seen previous. But I was more, rather than looking at Archuleta, I was more impressed with Pettis. That's his best performance to date, in my opinion, and well-deserved being champion at present.
And touching on what you saw with Archuleta, and I know you said you want to give Pettis the praise, but Archuleta is known for his kind of well-roundedness and able to change things up and switch up targets and everything like that. Did you find coming out of the first round that he was a little bit one-dimensional in that fight and looked a little bit kind of lost as to how to kind of break down the puzzle that Pettis was putting in front of him?
Yeah, well, look, if you look at Archuleta's game, he does it so he marries the style so well. That's his biggest strength, in my opinion. That didn't work in round one. So he reverted back to striking because his grappling exchanges were taking a lot out of him. And he could see if that was 20 minutes of constantly trying to take Pettis down, he wasn't going to get anywhere with it. He would tire more and Pettis would be more fresher in the striking exchanges. So I think he tried to almost cut his losses and stick to a kickboxing match rather than try and trust his style and really go for the takedowns. But Pettis, he surprised me. I'm sure he surprised Juan Archuleta as well. And he's well-deserved champ. I was very impressed with him.
I was very, very impressed with him. The most composed we've seen Pettis in his career, to my recollection anyway. But what I would say is he kind of, I know there was never much power putting anything and it was all just touching, but he seems to have pillows for hands. There seems to be no pop at all in the punches. Obviously he was racking up points, but I think he was more frustrating Archuleta than anything.
Paul, there's only one 135-pound man in Bellator that has knockout power, and you're speaking to him. Tell me who else is doing it. They all have pillow hands. That's all, and they all like. Look at it. It's a good division, but there's only one guy knocking guys out, and that's it.
Okay, so June 25th is still the target date, and who's on top of your list now? Because I know you were. If Pettis lost, you were looking for that. Is it Archuleta or is it someone else you're kind of hoping to get to sign on?
I'd love to fight either of those guys. Obviously, Pettis is the champ, and I reckon there's guys that are ranked higher that are going to be given that shot. I don't mind working my way up at all. There's guys number 9, Cass Bell, number 8, Jordan Lugo. These are guys that are ahead of me that shouldn't be. So I'd love to fight them, but there's guys that are higher up that I want to get matched up to. But June 25th is my target, and I'm working very hard towards that date. So whatever, any of them.
Anybody in the rankings want to sign for June 25th, basically.
Anyone in the rankings, anyone just outside the rankings, I don't mind. Like Eric Perez fought the other night. I would like to get that fight back because I had to pull out with COVID, and that's a fight that I'd still be very interested in. However, I'd like to be looking forward up the rankings. Like Cass Bell has no business being ranked ahead of me. He's 5-2. He's fought bums. Let's be honest. So there's no way he should be put ahead of me. And I'd put him out of the rankings in one round.
The other bantamweight fight, of course, on that card as well was Ruffian Stotts against Josh Hill, and I did want to touch on this one. More. Yeah, well, the other kind of big connotation bantamweight fight. Obviously Patchy Mix and Eric Perez were on that card as well, but because of the fallouts there was lesser connotations to those fights. With the Ruffian Stotts one though, I think the narrative seemed to be after that even though himself and Pettis are training partners, that he looked like he was next in line. Now maybe it was just me, but I was kind of underwhelmed by his performance against Josh Hill. He got enough to get the victory, but I don't think he was very impressive. What was your takeaway from that fight?
Both him and Josh Hill are very skilled. They're skilled guys. They're good athletes, but they're athletes. They're not there to finish. They don't finish fights. And I knew this. I said that's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at 15 minutes and which guy can outlast the other or be that little bit, a little bit more clever, better fight IQ, and it was Raffenstadt's. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that he didn't impress me. He did. Every time he fights, he does. But the, decisioning someone again, I don't think that warrants a title shot. To be honest,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. There's a lot of guys that in that division that are doing bigger, that are making bigger steps, that are putting bigger exclamation marks on fights. Exactly. So, but two good athletes, like I said before. But no, I don't think. I think there's other guys in line.
And before we move to this week's card, we have UFC 262, of course, this week. We are going to touch on one more fight from Bellator 258, and that is, of course, the culmination of the light heavyweight Grand Prix first round. And you had Anthony Rumble Johnson come back and take out Jose Augusto, but it was not without tribulations in that first round. How shocked were you in that first round when it looked like Rumble was hurt?
I'm not shocked. Like, you got to think that guy was out for 4 years. I'm more impressed. He was like, and I think Scott Coker hit the nail on the head with Anthony Johnson was annoyed of his performance of getting hit, and he said it was a crappy performance. For him to quote him,
yeah, he was very angry in the press conference about his performance. Yeah.
But Scott Coker says, like, people get it's a fight, people will get hit, but that guy was out for 4 years. Yep. You know what I mean? He hasn't been in any confrontation in 4 years. You know what I mean? So, like, for him to get in, to get rattled and come back, I thought was even more impressive. Now he's got his feet wet. He's back in. I don't think it'll take him too long to settle in. And I think that he's now used to a fight. So I think we're going to see a more switched on version of Rumble Johnson. All this was not new. He's done it many times as a season vet, but like, he had to go through the weight cut, the media, and then stepping in those bright lights first time without a crowd as well. A lot of things probably going on in the man's head. He took a shot, he came back, and he looked great with that knockout power again.
That's what I was going to touch on. He certainly didn't lose the touch of death anyway. My God, no. When that right hand landed, he couldn't have gone to sleep quicker. How do you see that one going against Nemkov? That, like, obviously, if you take the first round out of it, it looked like Rumble of old. That Rumble that he looked angry, and when he touches you, you're going to sleep. I think if that Rumble shows up, he's going to give Nemkov big problems.
Yeah, look, what I'm hoping for is he'll, like I said, got his feet wet now. He'll be well settled in, but if he's still, basically, you've got a guy who's getting back to it versus a guy who's at his very best in his prime.
Yeah.
So I don't think he gets past Nemkov. Of course, he has obvious threats like that knockout power, very good wrestling ability, but Nemkov is someone that I think will win this Grand Prix outright, and I think he'll put on a statement against Johnson if I had to predict it.
Yeah, my original pick was Rumble. I'm watery. He's got to get through this one. But after watching Corey Anderson, I think Corey Anderson is very much the dark horse in this tournament. He's just looked absolutely uber impressive since he's come over.
Yeah, and he looked great in the UFC. Corey Anderson, he's just a great athlete, but has good fight IQ. He's very, very neat for a 205er as well. He's very well rounded, so he'll cause a lot of problems. Whether he wins the Grand Prix, I'm not sure. I still think Nemkov is there. He's the one to beat, but who knows?
For sure, it's interesting anyway, and I cannot wait for the resumption of that.
Hey, before we move on, what do you think of Queally?
Peter, oh Jesus, how do we not touch on Peter Queally? Oh my God. We called it, right? And here's my gripe. And I said I would have picked Patricky based on just, I suppose, if you look at them on paper, Patricky is obviously far more experienced. But I had a gut feeling, third round, Peter Queally would pull it out of the bag and get a finish in kind of a grueling fight. And it was 1 second into the third round. Now, there's a dispute over this. Some are saying that it's the second round because it was a doctor call-off. But the official stoppage time was 1 second of the third round. So I just wanted to be known that I was on the money with my call. But yeah, phenomenal performance. And we touched on the heart. I suppose, look, he's your training partner. What did you make of the fight?
Oh, it was absolutely buzzing. Like I've got some tremendous teammates, but there's none more so than Queally. I'd be closer with. Like, we've been training for a decade together, and he's just salt of the earth. Queally is. For him to go out on the biggest performance of his career and produce what he produced, I was buzzing for him. I was just trying to say to him, in the lead up to this camp, he was looking at my spars. I was looking at him. We were looking at his. We were giving each other feedback. And I was just saying to him, just do what you do in the gym and there's nobody going to beat you. And he looked fantastic. But you see, when you're in there, you're not throwing elbows at training partners. You can be as ruthless as you want. And he's a ruthless man as well. So it was brilliant to see it. And I just I don't understand people's, what they were talking about. A lot of people were saying that he was 2 rounds down. A lot of people.
Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on that now. Yeah.
That was mental. So I said it to him. I said that I called it 1-1.
Yes, I was the same.
Yeah, and I said I was speaking to him the next morning, and I said I had it 1-1, but I said the tide was very clear which way it was shifting. You were going into the 3rd round, and you were fucking covered in blood, and you were screaming, and you were up for it. Well, he was fading. So I think if it had went into a 3rd round, it was going to go one way and one way only, and that was with Queally. So besides the cut, which he done to Pitbull, it's not as if Pitbull fell and landed on his elbow. That's not how it worked. Queally butchered him and bludgeoned him so bad the doctor stopped it. That's a stoppage. That's a fucking great stoppage. But the way the tide was going, if it was a rematch, you know what I mean, and it had worked out the same way, going to round 3, that was only going one way. So I'm delighted for him. I see him, he's number 6 in the rankings, but I wouldn't be surprised he's going to be given a title shot after that performance, to be honest.
Yeah, he was commenting to one of the team here in the MMA Opinion and about the lack of knowledge of the people clearly doing the rankings. How the fuck is he number 6 and Patrick still number 2? But I just want to touch on briefly the moment after the 2nd round when he walked back to the corner towards James, covered in blood and screaming with excitement. It was visceral. Like it's one of those moments that is going to live long in the memory. Any Irish MMA fan that was tuned into that's one of those moments that will kind of stand the test of time. And hopefully he gets a title shot out of this. I think that's the only answer for what's next. Because I think if Patrick had won that fight, I think he was next in line for the title shot.
There's so many arguments for it. Number 1, you just said it. If Patrick won, he was getting that title shot. Number 2, if the Pitbull SPG rivalry can now be, we can draw a line under with this fight.
Yep.
Number 3, he went out and he got a finish in a division where there's no big outliers. There's nobody that we're saying it has to be him next.
Yep.
There's not. There's some good fighters there, but none of them are really campaigning for a title shot, in my opinion. He put the biggest stamp on why he should get it, and based on all those reasons, he should get the title shot.
Yeah, I think. Look, Bellator are smart. I think Bellator make that fight. I think that's the big fight to make in the lightweight division right now. Look, there's some great fighters there, like you said. There's Brent Primus and there's a few more, and Usman or Magomedov, of course. I think there's lots of great fighters there, but I think if they want to sell a fight in the lightweight division right now, that is 100% the fight to make.
Yeah.
We do have to touch on UFC 262, I suppose, and give our predictions for that. And we are going to start out with the main event. You have Charles Oliveira taking on Michael Chandler in the lightweight division for the lightweight title. Charles Oliveira, obviously 30-8 overall. He's on an 8-fight win streak, wins over Ferguson, Lee and Jared Gordon in his last 3. And he's coming in against Chandler, who we know, look, he's had 2.5 minutes in the UFC octagon, but we know why he's done over in Bellator, and he's fought some of the best in the world. Wars with Alvarez, he went to war with Ill Will Brooks, came out the wrong side of that. But that performance against Hooker was kind of showed the evolution of Chandler, I believe, over the last number of years. I think in this one, I think because of the 8-fight win streak that Oliveira is on, I think there's a lot of hype on him. And if we go back to the early days of Oliveira and we talk about progression, obviously Oliveira is a much better fighter to when he first signed with the UFC. But Oliveira has a breaking point, and I've seen that in his career before. And he was one of those guys that I would never bet on, because he was one of those guys that he got finished, I believe, 7 times in his UFC career already. And he's a guy that initially went out and he would finish you or you would finish him. And I think when that's in a fighter and when you can kind of trade wins and losses like that, and yes, an 8-fight win streak, and there's a lot to be said for the motivation and the momentum, but I think he's going in against a guy who's riding the biggest momentum in the lightweight division right now, Michael Chandler. It's 2.5 minutes, but the hype is on his side somehow. I think Chandler gets this done. I think I can see Chandler finishing this fight. Maybe 2nd round, 3rd round, but I can see him getting a KO or a sub. I wouldn't be certain on which.
Yeah, I'm never a fan of Chandler getting a sub. You've said that against Hooker as well. You could see him guillotining. I remember right. He's just not he's not really a guy who gets a whole lot of submissions, but he does come to fight and he does get his finishes. He's great knockout power. The way I see this, you said it. Both guys they've really evolved. I think Charles Oliveira has evolved past that quitting stage. He's looked really good in his last, and I think Michael Chandler getting in wars with Brooks, like you mentioned. I think he fights much smarter. Since he lost to Pitbull, he's looked fantastic. He's looked way more measured, and he was always a very hard worker. But maybe just psychologically, he's just more switched on, and he's coming out and he's fighting a lot better, smarter fights. For me, I think Chandler gets it done too. I looked at the success of Charles Oliveira, what he'd done against the likes of Kevin Lee, a smaller, stockier guy, similar to Chandler. I can't see Oliveira submitting Chandler. I think Chandler's just too experienced and too good in the scrambles to get caught with a submission. I look at Oliveira versus Tony Ferguson, and he had such good wrestling advantages in that his sequences looked excellent, but I don't think he does that against Chandler. The only hope I think he does have against Chandler getting down would if he can get Michael Chandler to the fence. But I think Chandler is just too physical in the clinch, too physical in the wrestling, and that power that he possesses, I think, will back up and make Charles Oliveira a little bit more cautious to throw. He's very upright, Oliveira, and sometimes he can get hit, although he does land some crackers himself. I can see Chandler getting this done, but I can see it either being the 5-5, going to 5-5s, or I can see it him getting the TKO. Either way, the longer this fight goes, the better it'll work out for Chandler, in my opinion. We can see that Charles has went the distance plenty of times, but not quite at the pace that Chandler can push. So it's either going to be a decision win for Chandler over the 5 rounds, or he'll get a TKO win.
And not for 25 minutes is what I want to point out. And Charles Oliveira, I go back to it, and I know what you're saying about that. He has progressed past that quitting stage. And maybe quitting is kind of the wrong term to use, because obviously he's in a fight. I believe that he's not a quitter, but he's kind of had holes in his game previous. We look at the guys who he's been knocked out by in the UFC: Cerrone, Swanson, Holloway, Felder. None of them are, obviously, look, Cerrone holds numerous records and Holloway has finished a lot of guys, but none of them genuinely possess knockout power. They're more kind of, they'll just put it on you. And that's the reason I go back to my theory that I think there's a breaking point mentally there. I don't want to say the word quit. I just think he can be overwhelmed a little bit in a fight. And I think if we're comparing that to Michael Chandler, who's going to hit him and probably hit him harder than he's been hit, and we look at who he's fought in his career, Ferguson doesn't hit very hard, Lee doesn't hit very hard. You can go down that list, and there's very few guys that will have hit as hard as Chandler. I just can't see him standing up to that and taking too many of those shots. And I think, like you said, in the grappling exchanges, I think Chandler is just too physically strong for Oliveira. I think if Oliveira got a top position, Chandler's in trouble, but he's going to be a very hard guy to submit.
Look, it's you talked about breaking point, and I do agree with you when you look at Charles Oliveira's record and his credentials, and he's getting submitted by guys who don't quite have the jiu-jitsu he has. So I do understand about the breaking points, but then again, he got into UFC at a very early age. He's how many UFC fights has he had? It's a long way to go.
26.
And you're how many?
26.
That's crazy. You know what I mean? What the age that he got into the UFC, he's at 26 fights. And it's not just 26 fights to evolve your skills. It's also 26 fights to evolve your mindset of how mentally strong you can be against the best guys in the world, and even just a belief in yourself. Maybe it's taken these amount of fights for him to go, do you know what? I deserve to be here. I deserve to be the champion. And that's why we see him on this 8-fight win streak. And maybe he'll go out and he'll have his way with Chandler like he had with Tony Ferguson, and he surprised us all with that. But for me, I think the hype is behind Chandler. I think he reacts very well to that. And I think for the reasons I said about his knockout power, will make Oliveira a bit cagey on the feet. And I think his scrambling will make it very hard for Oliveira to get a hold of him and get any sort of a squeeze or submission.
For sure. And I do want to touch on, it's a little bit off topic, a trend we're kind of starting in the last few weeks, but Who do you think out of this matchup is a better stylistic matchup for Conor? If obviously, look, Conor has to get past Dustin, and that's a story for another day. But let's say Conor does get past Dustin, I think that Chandler is a better stylistic matchup for him. I just think Oliveira's style is a little bit more kind of elusive, and obviously there's the huge submission threat. I think Conor would prefer a Chandler victory in this, but again, Chandler possesses that wrestling that would be a problem for Conor as well.
Conor is the hardest fight in the division in Poirier, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think both of these guys get hit too much to be able to withhold that power that Conor possesses and just that accuracy and timing. I think stylistic, I think Conor would prefer Chandler for no other reason than it would be a bigger fight. It'd be a bigger fight than Charles Oliveira. Chandler's well able to speak. He carries the American flag. You know what I mean? It'd be a really interesting matchup. And I think it just say Chandler comes out and he gets another knockout win, which is very it's a likelihood as well. He'll have 2 knockout wins in a row in the UFC against 2 very high level guys, and that sets up a really nice fight again. On the other hand, you have Oliveira, who will be on a 9-fight win streak if he does. Hard to ignore it, you know what I mean? And I'm sure Conor would want a piece of that too. So, I think both of them are good matchups for Conor, but I think Conor has the hardest matchup in the division in Poirier stylistically.
Yeah, definitely. Keeping with that division, we'll move on to the co-main event, and we touched on him already, Tony Ferguson. Obviously, he's on the 2-fight skate, Oliveira and Gaethje, and he's taking on Beneil Dariush in this one, who's rising through the division on a 6-fight win streak right now. Wins over Diego Ferreira, who we saw last week was very impressive, even though he lost. Scott Holtzman and Drakkar Klose in his last 3. Beneil Dariush is a guy that's kind of gone under the radar a little bit in the last few years, and he's just kind of getting about his business. 14-4 and 1 overall in the UFC. He's kind of plugged away at those victories, and you compare that to Tony Ferguson, who's 15-3, and all the hype that went around Tony Ferguson. And in my opinion, Dariush has fought maybe not as many guys that were ranked very highly, but just as many tough fights. Ferguson, outside of his last maybe 4 or 5 opponents, and you can actually take one out of that, wasn't fighting the killers that everyone made out that he was fighting.
Jeez, what did Tony do to you? Holy shit.
Look, I've said this for a long time, though. I think Tony, obviously, he went on a 12-fight win streak. I'm shitting on all the guys on the really long win streaks here from the lightweight division. Yeah. But he went on that 12-fight win streak. But I said it for a long time. There was a lot of holes in his game. He's too easy to hit. I think, yes, he can scramble very well. But I think if he came up against an elite fighter in anything, an elite striker, an elite grappler, an elite submission specialist, I think he loses against all of them. He's very well rounded, but it was all too kind of thrown together and a little bit kind of haberdash. Obviously, look, his record is phenomenal and he has a lot of finishes on his record. But I think we've seen the blueprint to beat Ferguson, and that's not go backwards, square up to him and fight him at his game. And I think Beneil Dariush is the guy to do that. I can't see anything else other than Dariush victory here. I think Ferguson's on the slide. I think Ferguson needs to take some time off and look further down that division for his next fight. I think Dariush picks up a decision.
Yeah, I have Dariush to win as well by decision. I think Dariush, one thing that you said is that he's had some tough fights. One thing that Dariush he's had tough fights, but not the big reward fights. If you look at the guys that he's fought, they've been all like 5 to 10, where you win, and again, it goes under the radar. Tony's had big fights. Some of them you could argue have been easier fights than what Dariush had, but he gets he gets a lot of soot for it. He gets well recognized as a result. Dariush has been under that radar, but is one of the most skilled fighters you're going to find in the UFC. He has really nice striking. He's a difficult southpaw, and he's an absolutely excellent grappling. He's really, really technical. That's one of the things I love about his takedowns, but also his submissions. He's so well rounded and so technical. But his last fight, I was very surprised at how that was a split decision. I scored that unanimous.
Yeah. Same.
Against Frere. I couldn't believe that. Like, I was like, anytime Dariush fights, I'm going to watch it because I'm going to learn from it. He's absolutely brilliant in that sense. And as I was watching it, Frere is a great fighter, but as I get very clear, unanimous decision win here. But someone had it as a split. But I think Ferguson is don't get me wrong, he's super well rounded. He's got like unorthodox striking but effective striking. He's got very unorthodox grappling but effective grappling. He can wrestle. He does not mind being on his back. He'll get a darce from anywhere, and so he is skilled. Don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm trying to say, but I think he relies a lot on his physical attributes, a hell of a lot. And not, I don't mean as an explosive athlete. He's got a ridiculous chin, a chin that you can't train for.
And
He's got
cardio for days.
insane cardio his cardio is mind-boggling, because it's not, I'm sure he's an extremely hard worker, but his cardio is ungodly. It's insane. And like I said, when you put that cardio and that chin, and then he's quite skilled. But is he coming to that? Has he hit his peak in regarding those physical attributes? Both of those can diminish, and I'm wondering, is he on the wrong side of that? Now, maybe he'll come out and he'll be very confident, and he'll put Dariush away. Who Dariush, remember, is this is a big fight for him, a big fight. So he has a lot to prove. Well, Ferguson has been here before, and he has a chip on his shoulder now with his last fight. So I think it'll be a lot closer than maybe what we're saying. But Dariush, I like seeing contenders come up through the ranks. I do like Tony Ferguson. I think he's fantastic to watch. But I've been a fan of Dariush. I've been a fan of his style, and I think he's put his head down. He's worked hard. He hasn't been a mouthpiece. You know what I mean? And he lets his fighting do the talking. I think he will here on Saturday night as let his fighting do the talking again.
For sure. And I'm the same. I'm a huge Ferguson fan. I think he's been one of the legends of the lightweight division over the last 5 or 6 years. It mightn't come across the way I'm talking. Yeah.
Fucking hell.
But what I will say here is, look, we talk about the fight that's in front of him, though, and I don't see an avenue to victory for him. I really don't. How do you think he handles the scrambles against Dariush? Because like you touched on, Dariush's grappling is just so technical. I think Dariush is one of those guys that if he gets a top position against Ferguson's tricks and spins and switches aren't going to work on Dariush. I think he's far too good at keeping an opponent grounded and kind of keep transitioning through the stages very methodically. And I don't think it's the most exciting fight in the world, but I think Dariush is just too technical for him once it hits the mat, and that's where I see the fight taking place for the most part.
Again, I think this is what I think Dariush's game plan will be. He'll try and take the center, and he'll try put it on Tony. That he'll try to stay a little bit lower and land a bit more power shots and back Tony up. His best chance of taking Tony Ferguson down is without a doubt against the fence, and it's not because Tony is weak there. It's because Dariush is absolutely an expert there. On top of that, you do take away some of the scrambles when you put it against the fence. If you shoot on Tony Ferguson in the middle, you're going to be in a Granby roll or some sort of a counter with that, which I do think Dariush handles very well anyway. But again, the strengths will be against the fence. He showed against Ferreira some of his takedowns, and they were absolutely beautiful. Again, he's a super technical guy. You've got a technical guy against a very unorthodox guy. You've got a guy on the up and coming against maybe a guy who he probably wants to prove that he's not on the decline. It's a very contrasting styles fight, and it's probably the one I'm most excited for on this card.
Alternative, like I agree with what you're saying, but I think that unorthodox striking is going to haunt Ferguson in this one, because I think if he throws anything spinning or anything that's a loose kick or anything like that, I think Dariush eats it up and puts him on his back within seconds.
The most worrying thing that I've seen about Tony Ferguson's style as of late is he doesn't extend on his punches anymore. It's like his shoulders don't move. You know what I mean? Well, back in the day, he used to really, not back in the day, but back a few fights ago, he used to really utilize that reach.
Yeah.
Against Pettis, he didn't, and you could see how much wear and tear his face took on that night. But he was just so tough that he was able to keep it on him. But he used to use that length, and especially his jab, so much better than what he does now. And I think if he's going to let Dariush come in that much, he could be definitely in trouble on taking some big shots, and that will open up the takedown for Dariush again. So it's a great fight. I think again a lot will come down to the mindset of Dariush. Is he ready to get past the next step? Is he ready to be up there now with the elite? Because if he beats Tony Ferguson, his name isn't right up in that top 5. You're looking at those 5 big names in that division. He's right in there with the mix. If he loses, it's a long way back again for him. For
sure. We do need to touch on some of the other fights on this main card. We have Caitlin Chookagian versus Viviana Araujo for the women fighting on the main card of this 262. Chukagian 15-4 against Araujo 10-2. Araujo's kind of a little bit, I won't say untested at this level. She's had 4 fights, but she's 2-2, and she's put 2 wins together against Modafari and De La Rosa, and this is no disrespect to those 2 girls, but Chukagian is the right step now to find it kind of as a litmus test to find out where she belongs in this division. I think Chukagian's a tough out for anybody, and you look at some of the victories she's had, notable wins over Aldana, Lauren Murphy, Jennifer Moya, Joanne Calderwood, Cynthia Calvillo, the list goes on, and she's that girl and Antonina Shevchenko is also fighting on this card, by the way, but Chukagian's one of those girls where she in herself finds it very hard to beat the very top in the world, namely Valentina Shevchenko and maybe a couple more, Jessica Andrade, and maybe 1 or 2 more at the top of that division that she's lost to. But she's right there. She's on that kind of, and I won't even say gatekeeper because that's insulting for a girl that's probably 2 or 3 in the world or 4 in the world. But I think Araujo, this is a little bit soon for her in her career, even at 10-2. I think, and especially in her UFC career, with only 4 fights, I think Chukagian picks up a decision here, and I think it's a relatively straightforward one for her.
Yeah, we're agreeing again, Paul. I have it I have Chukagian by decision. It's one of these things where like MMA is not the sport to build up. It's just like boxing is much more.
Yeah,
MMA is much less that way. But when you look at the female divisions, the women's divisions, there's less athletes in each division. So sometimes you're going to have to make a bigger jump. And I think this is what I cannot pronounce her name.
Araujo.
There we go. Araujo. I think this is what Araujo is almost forced to do here. She's going in. I think it's deep waters and it's far too soon for her. She could pull it out of the bag, but to me, she's been impressive. But there've been decision wins against fighters who I think Chukagian would put away quite convincingly.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I'm going to go with Chukagian here with a pretty lopsided decision.
Yep, same page. Moving on to Shane Burgos versus Edson Barboza, and this is actually the fight that I'm most looking forward to. Shane Burgos is never in a boring fight. The guy just brings it. He comes forward. Love his style. Yeah. It's kind of a Tony Ferguson esque style that he fights in. He's very, very, very good everywhere, but not elite anywhere. And he's going against Edson Barboza, who's maybe just starting to find his feet in this weight class at 145 pounds. The win over Makwan Amarkani was very impressive. He had a 3-fight lose streak at that. Obviously, his first at 145, and he lost to Felder and Gaethje. And I mean, he's 9 losses in the UFC, but you look at the guys who he's lost to: Ferguson, Khabib, Lee, Cerrone, Gaethje, Felder, and there's a couple more with that, Michael Johnson. But Barboza's one of those guys, if this stays on the feet, Barboza's a nightmare for anyone. I think Burgos would do well to mix things up, get a few takedowns, and stay close and not stay on the outside, because I think if he stays on the outside with Barboza, I think Barboza picks him apart with kicks. And this is one of those that I can actually see leg kicks playing a huge part in. I've Barboza picked in this just about for a decision, but I'm completely torn, and I'm just looking forward to the fight.
It's going to be a great fight. I have Barboza for this, and I like Shane Burgos. I think he's done fantastic. He's a fantastic fighter to watch. Barboza, for me, it'll be about him now settling into the featherweight division. Yeah. Not everybody. So many people say every time you make weight, it gets harder and harder. I'm the total opposite. It gets easier every time. And on top of it, you're getting used to what your body is walking around at, what you're weighing. The whole process gets that little bit easier. And that's an enormous cut for Barboza. One of my teammates seen Barboza in the flesh, and he could not get over how that man made lightweight. So to see him at featherweight and still look excellent, it's crazy. Now he's lost to Dan Ige, and that was by a split decision. That was his first fight down. I thought he looked very well. It was like it was similar to Aldo's first bantamweight.
Yeah,
they lost narrowly, but it still looked good. Makwan, he looked very good against, and I think now he's finding his footing in the featherweight division, and he'll go ahead and I think I'm going to put him. I'm going to get him to, or I'm going to pick him to put away Shane Burgos. I think Burgos comes out and he's going to get a little bit. I love his style. He comes out to fight, but I think he walks onto something. And I think the leg kicks. I'm interested to see these great leg kickers such as Barboza, do they start going a little bit lower? Do they aim that 6 to 8 inches lower and go for the calf? Because it might be a hard habit to kick, but if you're that good of a kicker, it'll be a great thing to add to your arsenal.
You see, I don't know. I think the wide man thing is going to be playing on everyone's brain. I think the calf kicks, I don't think they're going anywhere just yet, but I think for the likes of Barboza, who does damage to the thigh anyway, I don't think he's going to feel necessary to start switching it down to a calf when there's a higher risk. When he can pick you apart, just kick. Obviously, it takes more, and you can take more damage to the thigh than you could ever do the calf. It could be the difference of 20 kicks, but I'd see Barboza continuing on the same frame and going for the thigh.
Yeah, I think so. I think like him and Aldo, and I was just wondering, like, will they make that little transition? You know, to aim that few inches lower. It sounds like nothing, but
that's a scary thought.
10,000 or 10,000 has been tens of thousands of kicks practiced.
Yeah,
so it's gonna be very hard to change that around. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I just like this fight. If I looked at Barboza's last two fights, you're going to automatically go with another decision. But I'm just hoping that he'll find, like I said, he'll have got used to this cut. It's a step up in competition, I think, as well, because Shane Burgess did beat Makwan last time out as well.
And
but
Swanson,
I can't see him clipping. I can't see him clipping him. Burgess has that style where he's going to stand with you. He's going to try and make it a dogfight too. And you're picking a wrong man to try and make that fight with Barboza, who's clinical.
That's for sure. Before we get to our bets of the week, we are going to touch on the last fight in the main card. We have Matt Schnell versus Rogerio Bontorin. Rogerio is 16-3, 2-2 in the UFC again. It's another one of these where Matt Schnell has kind of had a mixed run in that bantamweight division in the UFC. 6-4 overall. He's had some very good wins, and he had that 4-fight win streak, but he's struggled in some of the kind of trickier fights, like the Pantoja fight.
Pantoja's an animal. He's the dark horse of that division.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's just one of those where I couldn't put fate in either guy. I think it's a complete toss of a coin. I don't think a win over Bontorin gets him any closer to that top 10. Same with Bontorin. I don't think a win over Schnell probably gets him a little bit more credit on his record, given where he is in the division at the moment. But look, just for experience, I would side with Schnell, but I wouldn't be confident in picking in this one.
No, I like Schnell, I have to say. Now, his last two fights, I know he has a loss there against Pantoja, but like I said, Pantoja's dark horse of the division. He was super impressive in his last outing. He's been impressive ever since I've seen him in the UFC, but I thought his last fight, like, he's right up there with title contention for me. He has a split decision against Tyson Nam in his last one. So going by his last two fights, but for me, from watching a number of his fights, I just think that he's a much better fighter than Bontorin here, and I think he goes out and he gets the decision win. Don't be surprised if this isn't fight tonight too, because the flyweights are killing it this weather. They just can't miss with their fights.
They are, for sure. This one is actually at bantamweight, I believe, but yes, they are flyweights. Apologies, but this is contracted at 35 for whatever reason. But they are two flyweights, yeah.
Okay. I think I'm going to go with Schnell on this. I actually am that confident in him that I have him as one of my bets for the week.
Okay, and shout with your bet of the week, so.
Okay, my bet of the week, I'm going with Matt Schnell, Mike Grundy, and Katlyn Shukagan on a treble. Mike Grundy and Landa Venato is going to be a fucking cracker of a fight. You've got a really high level wrestler in Grundy who has knockout power against Venato, who's super flashy and got beautiful knockouts on his resume. So don't miss that fight. That's awesome.
And another guy who's fantastic in the scrambling. So Grundy's going to have his work cut out to keep that guy down and to kind of put it on him. It's going to be relentless from Grundy if he's going to win that fight. I think it'll have to be 15 minutes of 100 miles an hour.
I don't know if what I've heard about Grundy is correct, which I'm sure is, because a lot of people have told me his wrestling is absolutely outstanding. I think we're going to see this. Grundy's wrestling is almost legendary on the UK and Ireland scene, so it'll be very interesting to see. I think he'll. That's why I'm going with him in this one. I think he's great stand up. You see it as against who's the UK guy he knocked out again? Nadan Armani.
Yeah.
And then and his wrestling is outstanding. So we're going to see a good showing, I think. But Venato is a fun guy. He can turn your lights off with some spinning shit, no problem. But it's a great fight.
Yeah, just touching on my bet of the week. I have Grundy as well, and I have Chandler and Dariush. It's a tough card to pick on this week. I think there's a lot of close fights, so I kind of went with the top guys just to make it interesting for myself. I have Chandler, Dariush, and Grundy in the bet of the week. That is all we have.
Fight.
Yeah, that is all we have time for today. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say a lot of people maybe like you know what I mean? It's another great card. A lot of people should tune in once again. Like it's a huge title fight, and the implications afterwards are going to be enormous because that lightweight division is on fire, and then the co-main event is lightweight one as well. So it's a great card, and I can't wait for it. Absolutely buzzing for it.
For sure. And it's almost like we're being cheated in this pay-per-view because it's only one title fight as opposed to the 2 and 3 we've been treated to over the last couple of months. But it's still a phenomenal card, and you have Tony Ferguson in the co-main. You can't go wrong. Be sure and like on all the socials. Thank you for joining me again, Brian.
No worries, man. Thanks very much.
No problem. And subscribe on YouTube. Thank you.